you so much, Representative Blackwell. I really appreciate you having us here. I think, again, Best NC Business for Educational Success and Transformation is representing over 100 business leaders. Thank you. So you can hear me okay? My voice doesn't carry well. I represent over 100 business leaders from across the state who are deeply committed to education in North Carolina, and this is a topic that is obviously near and dear to our hearts because as business owners, and I have been one myself, we know that the employees, the talent in our organizations are the key to our success. So being invited to have a conversation about talent and educators is really right up our alley. Best NC is very much student focused, so I'd like to just pull us back just for a moment, and I think Representative Goodman made a good point about this is really about student success, and how do we make sure that we're having a conversation about compensation that's drawing us to student success. And we're very proud that in just a few years we've dramatically improved our graduation rates in North Carolina. We're at 85%, and as most of you would agree, I hope all of you would agree, that number needs to be 100%. But our student achievement levels, in terms of our performance on exams or measures of career and college readiness, are not yet where they need to be. 16% of North Carolina high school students didn't meet their benchmarks on the ACT, 47% didn't meet any of the benchmarks on the ACT, and 2/3 of our fourth graders, almost 2/3 of our fourth graders aren't reading at grade level. So we have lots to do, and as we think about this important topic of compensation, it really should focus in on the fact that educators matter, that they are the solution to those problems. They're not the cause of those problems. I want to be really clear that this is a positive conversation about the importance of educators as the solution. So I want to talk about, of course, educators matter. They're the single most important factor in a schoolhouse building. We can talk about digital learning, which is an important tool for great educators. We can talk about facilities, but the bottom line is a great teacher in front of students is the most important factor. But principals matter too. So I will sometimes use the phrase educators. I think of everyone in the building, nurses, guidance counselors. It's a team effort to educate students, and so we really do need to be thinking broader than just a classroom teacher and thinking differently about our educators. And if you look at the best reform efforts, if you're really thinking about how are we going to improve education, they've always focused on educator talent as the primary focus. I also just want to put it in context. Representative Blackwell, you've said twice now in this conversation about how we have accelerating demands for education. And so I want to bring us back to a classroom that I remember from the 1970s. This classroom looks really familiar to me. And in the 1970s, 1/3 of our workforce could leave school without a diploma and go on and be able to support their family. And only 17% had to leave with a high school diploma and get something beyond a high school diploma. In 2020, that number goes to 67%, so fully 2/3 of the students who are leaving our schools, and as we said, 100% have to get a high school diploma, and then 2/3 have to get something beyond. So to say that we're demanding more of our educators is to put it mildly. We're demanding to go from 37, 1/3 of our students not getting a high school diploma, to basically every single student. We're moving from 17% having something beyond a high school diploma to 67%. It's a huge increase in what we're expecting from our education system. But if you look at those two classrooms from the 1970s and the one that my 5th grade boy sits in today, they look pretty much the same. I think Dr. Atkinson used to say a lot, we've kind of squeezed what we can out of the old system. And so when we're talking about compensation, we're thinking about compensation. I'm urging a conversation about how we can really think differently about an outdated structure, including the fact that when a teacher walks into a school building, they're essentially walking into a line industrial model where every single person in the building is reporting to a principal and not getting these opportunities that all three basically of the presenters have discussed, that opportunity to really grow in their profession. So I want to talk about a couple of the challenges. In your handouts, you have a second set of handouts with a couple of extra data points, but I really want to focus on data points around retaining teachers, around attracting teachers to where they're needed most, and around recruiting teachers, attracting teachers into the profession. And so our teacher turnover, while imperfect, as I agree completely with Dr. Stoops, we need to do better. This is a pretty good, important point, is to see the difference between career status turnover, which is at 13%. Our beginning teachers are turning over at a much higher rate. They're turning over at 21%. And importantly, our lateral entry teachers are turning over at a 24% rate. That's really high. And when you think about strategies to retain teachers, we need to really think about which teachers are we trying to retain. Looking at, again, I completely echo Dr. Stoops, is comparing us to the national average. It's sort of a good kind of comparison. It's not great. We've always been below the national average. We're sort of approaching that. We're at a 14% turnover rate. But in thinking about where we need teachers, the DPI report on staffing, 83% of our LEAs last year reported vacancies in 9th to 12th grade math. We're seeing vacancies in science, middle grade math, and special education. I'm sure you all think STEM, special education are the areas. But the more superintendents I'm talking to today, even urban superintendents who never have a problem filling elementary school positions, I think this is going to look very different even as early as next year. We're starting to hear from large area superintendents saying, I can't even fill elementary school positions. So we really have a problem, not just in filling hard to staff positions, but really getting enough teachers into the profession. And in terms of getting the right teachers where they're needed most, I think this chart is really compelling, and I would ask each of you to really think hard about this beyond the compensation conversation, but any other systemic work that can be done. When we talk about equity, we talk about the constitutional right to access to a great education. This chart shows basically that high poverty schools have dramatically less access to our highest performing teachers, and far more of their teachers are our lowest performing teachers. Now I will highlight that this is growth measures. This is not autocorrelated, to use wonky, geeky terminology. It is not because they're teaching in a poor school that they are bad. There's no correlation between growth and poverty. What we're finding is that when teachers can choose if they're going to work in Wake County or Hope County, if they're going to work at even a high poverty school within Wake County versus a highly PTA engaged school, they're going to choose the lower poverty school. So what are we doing systemically that is creating this problem? And I think this goes beyond compensation. And very importantly, the third issue is how do we attract teachers into the profession? In the last 5 years, the UNC system has seen a 30% decline in applications to the schools of education. So if we're seeing a 14% turnover and we're not getting enough students into the schools of education, all of those hard to staff school and subject lists are going to get awfully long really quickly. And we won't have enough of a bench, again, as Dr. Stoops said, to be able to pull from. And again, like our turnover rate, this is not a North Carolina issue. These are national numbers that look exactly the same. Nationally, there's a 30% decline in applications to schools of education. I would argue that we have a national crisis where millennials don't want to go into the teaching profession. And so here's the big reveal. The state that has figured this out, Bueller? No one has figured this out. And Dr. Stallings is right. There are wonderful, shining examples all over the state of North Carolina. If any state has figured it out in pieces, we have figured it out. But we don't have that systemic approach. We know, I share your sense of urgency, Dr. Atkinson. We need to get all of these pieces, these things that we know can work, and put them together and get them moving. And so I would propose, nationally, we need to think about elevating the education profession. And North Carolina, I think, can lead that charge. When you think of a profession, what do you think of? You leave your university, you get hired for a job, you come in and you have have a manager, you have a boss, you have 6 to 8 colleagues reporting to one person. You're surrounded by systems of support. You walk in, you have all the resources you need. I'm an accountant. I can't be an accountant if I don't have a working computer, right? You are surrounded by the systems of support. You have embedded professional development. You have people every day who are nurturing your career and helping your career and maximizing your potential. And then guess what? You get paid what you're worth. If you sell more, if you perform more, if you develop more, you get paid more. And then you have all sorts of unlimited career opportunities. That's not what the education profession looks like. And yet, both of these paths require a 4-year degree. And somehow we think of educators as this altruistic, anyone can raise their hand, or I'm a natural born person that has to go into the classroom. It's not, it's a profession. There's a reason our lateral entry teachers are actually our lowest performing teachers. And it's because they have to learn to be a teacher, which is great news, because guess what? You're not born to be a teacher. You learn to be a teacher. It's a profession like any other, and it deserves to be treated like a profession, like any other profession. And so compensation is a piece of that puzzle. It's not the entire answer, and I would ask that as we're looking at solutions, that we're really thinking about comprehensive solutions. And then there are the millennials. This is the future of education. Millennials, by definition, want to teach. They want to do something that will make an impact. But by definition, they don't want to be teachers. Their idea of a priority for a job, you go down this list: work-life balance, recognition and respect, opportunities to lead, opportunities to make a greater impact, a manager who empowers them, and the ability to grow and learn new things. That doesn't happen in the current model. And so when we look at a 30% decline in applications to the schools of education, it's really not a surprise. And so again, a compensation model, but all of the other things that Dr. Stoops mentioned, a lot of different things, induction and the professional experience have to go into fixing that disconnect. And so any compensation plan really does need to look at solving all 3 of these problems. The first being to retain great teachers. The second being able to recruit the best teachers to where they're needed most. That might be hard to staff subjects, but it might be rural, urban, high poverty schools. And the third is, what will it take to get millennials to come into this profession and see this as a real professional choice for them? And I won't go through all of the best practices. There are so many from across the state. Jacob Vidker made a recommendation 2 years ago. I encourage you to go back and take a look at that. When you talk about base pay, Daniel Pink also says, pay them enough to get it off the table. So I would strongly recommend a conversation about increasing base pay, but especially increasing base pay where teachers getting their greatest improvement in their profession. This chart on the left shows that doctors and lawyers, their dramatic increases in pay really happen in the first 10 years when their increases in professional experience are increasing the most. Whereas the teaching profession, if you go back 2 years on the pay schedule to when we had it flat, our pay schedule was the exact opposite of what a professional pay schedule would look like. And I would encourage us to continue. It started to move forward, and I would encourage us to continue building that pay schedule so that we're not losing those beginning teachers as much. Here's a kind of a look 2 years ago, or 2013 is the bottom line. As you can see, the chart is moving up, but it's also moving so that teachers can earn more faster, which is absolutely consistent with best practices. And then as you move it up, you're looking at, again, front-loading the pay schedule and trying to reduce that high turnover of the beginning teachers. But there are lots of non-financial motivators, and I think they have to be considered. There was a study here that shows that when you're assigned a mentor, you have a dramatically lower turnover rate than if you're not assigned a mentor. So how do we embed mentorship in as a non-financial solution? It costs something to ensure that you have mentors in the classroom and in the schools, but it is much less than paying teachers more. And then recruiting great educators to where they're needed the most. You've heard a lot of conversation about bonuses and incentives. One thing that concerns me is when you look at Guilford County or Winston-Salem, those programs worked, but they're incredibly expensive. You have to sort of recruit people in, and it works within a district. They generally don't work to get somebody to move outside of the district. So strategic staffing is happening in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, where they're paying teachers to go to where they're needed most. To really get somebody to move from Charlotte-Mac to Hoke, it's just not going to happen in a way that's financially feasible. And so looking at creative opportunities, and we would recommend a scholarship program where you're going into the communities where you need teachers the most, and you're recruiting them into the profession, incentivizing them with scholarships, and saying in exchange for these scholarships, you must serve 4 years in a hard-to-staff school and subject. So now you go to Hope, you get a candidate from Hope County, they go into the School of Education, they come back and teach there, and your chances are going to be much higher that they're going to stay there for their career, their family's there, they're happy to be there, which is very different from coming down, going down to Enloe and saying, I'm going to pay you $30,000 a year to get you to move out here. It's a much more effective strategy. And so you have a chart in your list of really the difference between incentives or bonuses versus scholarships. And then also looking at really multiple factors. How do we retain? How do we attract? How do we incentivize? Really changing up how we look at the workforce and creating career opportunities for teachers. Representative Jordan, you mentioned the bonuses, right? And the idea in Charlotte-Mecklenburg and their Project Lift schools, for example, they'll pay teachers $10,000, $20,000 more, 30 to 50% more. But it's not a bonus. It's a career ladder. They have now moved from I'm a teacher to a management position, but they're still in the classroom, which I think is critically important. We're not moving people into more administration. We're not adding layers of bureaucracy. You're creating career opportunities for teachers. So it's very, very different from the concerns about bonuses don't work, incentives don't work, but career opportunities keep people in the profession. We saw this with the nursing profession. It used to be that every nurse was just a flat line, every nurse was the same. And now we have nurse 1, nurse 2, nurse 3, nurse anesthetist, and so you're paying nurses where they're needed most. And so on top of front-loading that pay schedule that I mentioned, then you're talking about performance opportunities. And again, I mentioned Project Lift. So if somebody says, oh, well, you're not focusing on your veteran teachers, that's where you're focusing on your veteran teachers, by giving them these career opportunities and opportunities to really expand their impact. And get creative. Let the local level, I completely agree, let the local level figure it out. In one place, it may be about mentorship, and that's the top priority, but I talked with a superintendent recently. He said, I have this school. I have 3 positions for science. I have 2 really, really great science teachers. I can't find another science teacher. But if I pay each of those science teachers 30% more, they're more than happy to have 50% more kids. So let's let the principal, let's let the superintendent get creative and figure out exactly what it is that they need to do with their resources. And again, that was budget neutral. There was no extra cost for them to get that done. And then finally, any professional wants to have the resources to get their job done. Digital learning is a great example of that. It maximizes teachers' potential to be able to come in every day. As much as I say it's not an altruistic profession, it is a profession, but just like any profession, at the end of the day, you want to feel like you made a difference, and you want to have as much of an impact as you can. So basic resources are really important for employment satisfaction in any job. And so again, I guess, Terry, it looks kind of similar, the comprehensive circle. It's the way it is. So if we consider this a one-size-fits-all, or if we just do this or if we just do that, I really think we're going to be throwing good money after bad. We need to really look comprehensively at this. And so we have 8 recommendations. And the first one, in your second set of data points that talk about principal pay, I I know this is a conversation about teacher pay, but in the last 7 or 8 years, principals have had 1.2% pay increase and a $750 bonus, and they are, according to the latest data, 50th in the nation. Great teachers want to work for great principals, but great principals will leave if they're not adequately compensated. And so I would say a dramatic increase in salaries for principals would be our top recommendation. And restructuring the principal schedule. Our principals leave their schools very quickly because their best way to make a pay increase is to move. So really rethinking our principal pay schedule is important, and it's important for retaining great teachers. Enable every teacher to make a competitive wage. Again, I would ask you to look at the Jacob Bigger research. I'd also have to ask you to look, we had from 2003 to 2013, it's in your data, a 17.4% effective decline in teacher pay. And then in 2014, we had an effective 6.9%, and last year about a 3.9%. So we're seeing a real improvement, but we do need to continue moving that forward to really get back to where we need to have competitive base wage. Fourth, continue to invest earlier to earlier teachers. We are seeing them leave, and it's because by coming at 21 or 23, by 30 you've got a couple of kids and you need to support your family. And so really looking at this within the context of making it competitive, because otherwise they'll go somewhere else to support their family. 5, recruit teachers to hard-to-staff positions through loan repayment and scholarships, incentivize them in as opposed to bonusing them in. 6, empower districts with more flexibility. They know what they need. Help free them up. We talked about Project Lift. They actually have restrictions. They can't expand their program district-wide right now as it is. There are policies that would have to be changed for them to be able to do that. 7, reward experienced teachers for expanded goals. That's what House Bill 662 and other efforts have proposed to do. And 8, foster great working conditions. Look for every opportunity, whether they cost money or not, to create great working conditions for our teachers and our school leaders and all of the educators in the building. They absolutely deserve it. And again, keeping in mind, not all of these cost money. Some of these are policy changes. So, appreciate your time. Thank you.